Sun City book lovers, welcome to Meet the Author. This show is made possible by Sun City Hilton Head Lifestyle Services, giving us a chance to learn more about the books we want to read and the people who create them.
Kim, we have a lot to talk about here. You are the author of 7 books. But we've got to focus, and we're going to focus on your trilogy, 2 books that you're bringing us, Shadows of the Moss and Shadows of the War.
Yeah.
How would you, as the author, introduce this to prospective readers?
Well, Shadows of the Moss is a story about Maggie McFarland, an Irish immigrant who is fleeing persecution and abuse, and she stumbles on the Underground Railroad. It's how her life intertwines with that and changes. And then Shadows of the War was the next step, and how things alter when the Civil War arrives on her doorstep.
Now, I've read, stalking you a little before today, that living in Beaufort really stimulated your desire to be a historical fiction writer. Please tell us about that.
Well, as everybody knows, if you live here in the Low Country, you can't throw a rock without hitting something historical. Hated history growing up, boring. And then you move here and all of a sudden you're living in the middle of it, and it just kind of sucks you in and you want to know more. And then all of a sudden, the characters start, listening and intertwining with it. So, inspiration.
These 2 books are such a poignant treatment of the Civil War era. How do you weave the historical story, the facts, with this fiction that you've created?
It's hard to say. It just kind of naturally happens. The characters tell me what they need to do and want to do. So the facts are there, and I just let the characters fill in how they're going to be living through those facts. So, and sometimes some of the instances drive the characters and what they're going to do next. So it really is kind of a give and take. I know it sounds a little weird, but
it seems like a big juggling act to me. But I will say that I also read about you that you call your books your children. You refer to them that way. So when I look at these 2 books, and I felt like you have put so much into these pages, how do you juggle, all of the things that you're doing with this? Is it a matter of them being challenging or well-behaved children?
Well, it depends on which series you're talking about. I had gone to a workshop years ago, and the woman leading it was the one that said that writing a book is like giving birth. It's your child, and you're sending it out into the world, and you're scared how the world is going to accept it. And it just made sense to me, and it does feel like you've birthed a child. So Maggie is wonderful. She's my good girl. I sit down to type, and Maggie's just chatty. She gives me all the story I want. In my haunted series, Sarah, juvenile delinquent. If I'm not writing what she wants me to write, she just won't speak. So Maggie's my good girl. Sarah is my delinquent.
Now, if I were to be a writer and I wanted to be like you, what's your favorite in your writing process? Is it developing the characters? Is it the setting? Because we've got such rich settings in here. Or is it the plot? Which one's driving you?
Well, I'm what they call a pantser. I don't plot. I fly, but I just sit down and the story comes. If I try and outline and plot or do character development, I'm just dead in the water. So they just kind of, I have a lot of voices in my head. You can analyze that any way you want. But I guess my favorite part of writing and the easiest part for me is setting. Because a good majority of the stories are set in the Low Country, and it's just, again, it's so rich and so beautiful. It's impossible not to enjoy writing about it. So to me, that's the easiest part, but the rest is really hard.
Well, let's talk about the books then, and how those processes relate to these particular works that you've done. You mentioned setting, and it's interesting because I am captivated by reading, whether it's historical fiction, a mystery, when it's set somewhere where I've had a connection. So when I see Penn Center, when I see Rose Hall.
Yeah.
A little twist on the nail.
Yeah.
It's just, it draws you in, and it makes you feel so grounded with the book. I think you just hold the pages tighter. But I also really want to talk to you about your characters.
Okay.
Characters are very important to me when I read a book, and I'm sure to many readers. This book's characters are the majority of the characters are so good, so altruistic, that you want so much. And when you see things might go wrong, you're just, pushing for them. But my main thing that I took from this is you gave female characters set in a historical part of time and gave them so many tremendous accomplishments. Was that intentional?
Ironically, no. It was in Shadows of the Moss for Maggie, because I wanted people to understand how cruelly treated the Irish were. A lot of people did not know that they were so loathed and so despised, and now we celebrate them. And I look at other cultures that people loathe and despise today, and I'm like, stop. We've already been there and done that. Let's learn from our past. Shadows of the War ended up being about those strong female characters and roles that most people don't know they held. And yet that's the way it turned out. So that was an unanticipated. When I finished it, I was like, oh, look what happened. So that one actually surprised me as well. And it's a pleasing thing, because I always write, you hear the strong female character, blah, 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 blah. But women historically have done so much and been overlooked. People don't talk about that we've done as much as men.
Well, it's interesting because Kristen Hanna's book, The Women, has become such a popular read for women especially, and to admire what we did not know those women were going through. But I see that in your books, Kim.
Thank you.
I really do. I mean, and I can't give away because you're going to read the book, but someday we'll have a conversation, maybe when the third book comes out, about one of your characters that really would surprise you with what she accomplished. And of course, Maggie. Maggie is tremendous.
My sweetie.
You just want everything for her.
Yes.
And then let's talk about plot, because again, you have the history that's driving us through these books. You're giving us, so much knowledge there, but you've woven in a love story. Well, actually a couple love stories. You've got these family relationships and issues. And really, a coming of age with one of the characters is what I call it. And that's the spoiler alert that I don't want to give away.
Yeah.
But there's so much that happens in the books. I think you've really given us a gift with these. So let's not leave you without giving a nod to your talents. You have a diverse background. You are, of course, an author.
Yes.
All right. Psychologist.
I'm a school psychologist, have been for 26 years.
Okay, you are a historical reenactor.
Yes, preferably 1880s. And I reenact history not because of the history, but because of the clothing. I just love bustle gowns, and bustle gowns are just prettier than what we wear today, and so that's my excuse. It's all about the dress, darling.
It's all about the motivation. And then lastly, I guess because of all of that, you've been a screen actress.
I have, unexpectedly. I can blame my husband for that one. Years ago, back in 2009, gosh, that was a long time ago, Robert Redford was filming in Savannah, and they were looking for reenactors that had their own clothing. And we went down to the Savannah Mall, and I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Well, we were selected, and then while we were on set, I was pulled and told that I was going to be Mrs. Stanton. And Mr. Stanton happened to be Kevin Kline. So I was Kevin Kline's wife in the movie. Darn, hate that, not.
Yeah, you've already thrown out the Robert Redford thing.
Oh, so. Robert Redford, he was so sweet too, because he was just like when they pulled me off from the group and said, oh, you're going to be Mrs. Stanton. And Robert Redford walks up and goes, oh, hi. He says, I'm Robert Redford. He says, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. And I'm shaking his hand, and you have to stay calm. And inside I'm like, but yeah, he was just nice. And both of them were.
So how do all this work for you to create such success in your life?
It's all God. I'm just here living it.
And it sounds like you weave a lot of these things together.
Oh, yeah. There's some autobiographical stuff in some of my books.
Okay. I've read both of these. Now, just like other readers, we're going to want to know, this is a trilogy. Something's missing. When and what can we expect from the third book?
The third book is what we call a crossover, because my other series, which is it's a Dreamist series, it's about Sarah Holden who can see the dead in her dreams. The problem is they can see her too. So she communicates with the dead in her dreams to help them resolve the manner of their death. So there's mystery. That series is going to cross over with this one. So one of the characters in here who has unresolved issues is going to be the one haunting Sarah's dreams, and she's going to have to help her work through it.
Should I go back and get some of those dreamists?
Sure.
So that
I'm all about everybody buy the book.
Good answer. Good answer.
Good answer.
These have been fabulous reads. Those of us who have read them are going to so enjoy hearing more about them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have been an author for about 12 years now. My first two books were traditionally published with Tate Publishing. They closed their doors in 2017, quite scandalously. They were convicted of 44 felony counts of extortion and fraud and all that kind of good stuff. And it was a Christian publishing house. You gotta love it. You can't make this stuff up. So anyway, I was kind of catapulted into the indie world because I wasn't about to trust another publisher, and I wasn't going to trust an agent, and I don't have the self-confidence to go through 80 to 100 rejections because I cry every time something goes wrong on the computer. So I'm just not one of those people. So I instead cried and kicked and screamed and threw tantrums. I'm waiting for my husband to look up and laugh at me because I can't tell you how many times he found me on the front porch sobbing with a bottle of wine. I can't do this anymore. I don't know what I'm doing. So fast forward 7 books later. I have been indie now, well, since 2017. Now I can do it in my sleep. I assume you guys are all familiar with Rose Hill Mansion. I was a docent there for 2.5 years. I called it the fairy tale house. I loved, loved, loved every minute of it. And of course, 1858 Mansion has ghosts. She had several ghosts, because a mansion that fabulous can't have just one. We had, I think, 4 or 5. But the main ghost was the elegant lady. And it was said that she was very, very active. A few of the docents, when we would start the tours, our backs would be, if you've been in there, there's this glorious winding staircase. And so the tour group would be facing you, and some of the guests actually saw the elegant lady standing behind the tour guide. When they talked about the safe house thing, when I heard safe house, I heard Underground Railroad. And all of a sudden, God shifted that story that was going to be a haunted story to, okay, I'm doing the backstory of Maggie McFarland. That was what I named her, and this is what's going to happen. So it took a sharp right turn at Albuquerque and went way off the road. So there's a little history on the Shadows series. Book 3 in the series is going to be what they call a crossover, and it's going to cross over to the Haunted series. Sarah Holden is the main character in my Haunted series. She can see dead people in her dreams. The problem is they can see her too. So they come to her. She's what they call a dreamist. And these souls come to her in her dreams because the manner of their death is unsolved, and she has to help unravel that, which can be quite frightening at times. Book 3 was at the Lizzie Borden house, so I'll let you go there with that one. A little bit gruesome. Needless to say, so one of the characters from the Shadow series is going to show up in Sarah's dreams when the books cross over, and she's got to help them resolve the manner of their death. And that's all I'm going to say about that right now. I can tell you what's going to happen, but then I have to kill you. Not really, but. So that's a little bit of my author journey and a little bit about my books. I write what's called cozy horror. So there's no cussing, there's no explicit violence, I mean, except for the fact that, Lizzie Borden's parents, got hatcheted to death. But, I'm not, getting into the gory details. It's not a Stephen King novel. I started a YouTube channel, and it's called Gothic Ghosts and Graveyards. and you're welcome to subscribe to it. I'm going to be doing little mini videos in graveyards, give you a little history of graveyards and cemeteries, maybe a specific history of a historic graveyard, history of Gothic novels, the history of ghost stories. Y'all don't realize ghost story history goes all the way back to biblical times.
Quietude, peacefulness, a dignified grace. These things aren't just for those who have gone on before us, but for all who dwell here.
It's really quite fascinating. So if you want just a little scare, because it's always spooky season, at least in my house, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. So that's just a little background on me and my writing and the books I have out now. So I'm going to open up because I want you guys to kind of guide what it is that you want to know. So who has any questions? Please have questions. Yes, sir. How do I name my characters? That's a great question. In Truer Words, my very first novel, a lot of them are named for family members, specifically my grandfather, Dr. Harvey Brown Oates, no offense, gents, greatest man that ever lived. And for a long time, I would either name the characters Harvey or Brown. They always called my grandfather Brown, never called him Harvey. So that's where a lot of my names came from, and then as subsequent books came along, sometimes it's like I'll know what letter I want it to start with. And since it's almost always 19th century, I go online, it's like, okay, 19th century ladies' names or men's names, and I'll scroll through until the character says that one. And if you, let me tell you something, if you give them the wrong name, you can't write them. You'll keep stumbling and stumbling, and I've given them names that I thought they should have, and the character wouldn't develop. And then I change the name, and all of a sudden it flows. Does that answer the question? Okay. Well, for me, the 19th century, because it's the most beautiful century in the world, I love the dresses. That's why I don't do Revolutionary War reenactments. I don't like the dresses. No offense, I couldn't give a flying rat's tail about the war or the history. I just love the era because everything was fancy and overdone and frou-frou, and I just love that. Of course, it's fairy tale land because it was anything but comfortable, you know, no air conditioning, no indoor plumbing. It was not pleasant, but it sure is pretty to look back on. And so that's why I tend to lean towards that. Although, book 4, I did a little alteration, a little side turn again. Book 4 in the Dreamus series is actually set in Savannah, and it's going to cover Prohibition and the suffragette movement. She was asking about the house that we live in, Faith Cottage. She is my baby. I love, love, love her. I stalked her for 10 years. And I'm not joking when I say stalked, I stalked. So she was a blessing from God. When I wasn't looking, He plopped her in our lap. Her main portion was built in 1890, a subsequent edition in the early 1900s, and then a 1975 edition. The 75 edition and the 1890 edition, totally solid. You know, level floors. The in-between edition is leaning like the Tower of Pisa. I don't know. Nonetheless, she's a beautiful little Victorian cottage. There's very little of her original interiors left, sadly. 2 owners before us, the woman that lived there, it's 1,200 square feet, mind you, had 60 cats. And this was a house that hadn't been remodeled since the 60s. So it had shag carpeting, and remember the old ugly wood paneling? So yeah, it was nasty. It was in the papers, actually. So when people are like, which house is yours? And I'm like, you remember the lady with the 60 cats? And they're like, yeah. I was like, that's our house. And they're like, oh. And I'm like, hey, she better now. So the gentleman that bought the house from her, because she died in the house, the gentleman that bought the house from her descendants gutted and renovated, and then we bought her in 2010. So, and she's haunted by a Civil War nurse because the house catty corner across the street to us is the Barn Will Go house. It's on the cover of my first haunted novel. It was the hospital for the Black Civil War soldiers, and we were hospital grounds. Our house wasn't built. She was 1890. So one of the nurses actually haunts our house, and we have ghost cats. We actually have cats. You know how cats are, they'll rub against your leg, or they do that spontaneous room change. We have that all the time, and we have dogs. Every reader is a little different. Some people love all of that description, and they want it to go real slow and flowy. I like books that are bam, 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 bam. I want it to keep going. Jana de Leon is one of my very favorite authors because you get in that book, you're not going to stop turning the pages until you're done. You might be bleary-eyed and up for 48 hours, but by God, you're going to read that book because it's very fast-paced. It just, any writer will tell you, you have to read in your genre. Read as much as you can in your genre, because what it does is it stirs that part of your brain and gets you thinking like that. And so I try and write with a fast pace. I do a lot of description because I love description, but the pace, I try and keep it going quickly instead of kind of dragging on, because that's what I like to read, and so I try and write that way. So, Shadows of the War sequel. And I will read the prologue. It's not very long, don't worry. December 1860. I've been leading this fight for years, Mr. Rhett declared. Tonight is the night we declare our independence. Agreed! Hear, hear! Independence for South Carolina. The voices roared through the lower level of the Craven Street home in Beaufort, South Carolina. With only 5 days until Christmas, the group of delegates representing the area were eager to sign the papers that would separate the state from the Union. No more of their ridiculous taxes, one man cried out, or ignoring the law, another shouted. Gentlemen, the shadows of war are upon us. May we fight to protect our rights and repel their anti-slavery views. Glasses clinked and each man downed the shot of whiskey. Mr. Rhett drew a pocket watch from his silk brocade waistcoat and checked the time. Shall we make our way to Charleston? Indeed, Mr. Barnwell replied. The men stepped into the crisp December air and boarded the carriages lined along the dirt road in front of the Greek Revival Mansion. After more than a decade of clamoring for self-government, it seemed as if the discourse was finally coming to fruition. So that's the opening. I know the very beginning and I know the very ending, and I would say 98% of the time that ending stays in place. I had one book, gosh, which one was it? I think it was the Borden House one. We switched the ending at the very last minute, which delayed the release. Because I remember an idea hit me, and I was talking to my writing coach. I was like, I know we're doing this, but what if I did this instead? And she was like, oh, I like that better. And I was like, crap. So another month of rewriting the whole ending. But yeah, I usually have scenes. In fact, when I started writing, I would write scenes. And just as the scenes would come, and then I would put off rearranging them in order because it's a nightmare. You got to figure out what goes where. And about 3 years ago with NaNoWriMo, I finally started forcing myself to go from beginning to end. I'll still have a scene pop in my head, and I'll put it in what I call the parking lot. I have an outtakes folder on my computer, and so I will put that idea in the thing until I get to a point where it's like, oh, that will fit right here. And then I copy and paste. How do I stay neutral? That is an outstanding question because it is a scary thing, especially as a white woman who is writing about black characters. Oh, that's a hot one. That is a hot one because I don't know what it's like to be them. I really don't. It's a completely different experience. And I recognize that. I actually went to a few of my colleagues who are black women, and I sat down with them one day and I said, tell me if I'm offending you, because I'm really not. I said, but once I get this book written, would you be willing to read it? I want to make sure I'm not doing or saying something that would be inappropriate, because it would be like a man writing from a woman's perspective and they're making it sound like, our lives are just so easy and happy-go-lucky. We'd be offended. It's like, wait a minute, you're not a woman and that's not right. And they were like, of course, we would be happy to. They're called sensitivity readers. So if you're going to write about something, and now for a woman to write from a man's perspective, we can do that because we're smarter. right? I'm picking on you now. Look, he's back there going, you just offended me. I'm picking on you now. Some of the topics I cover in Shadows of the Moss, Shadows of the War, I'm definitely going to lose friends on. I'm going to lose friends on that one because I didn't hold back any punches on either side, Southern or Northern. Both really did some horrific things. It wasn't, oh, they're the heroes and they're the bad guys. No. Bad stuff on both sides. But sensitivity readers, if you're writing about a marginalized topic, it's good to have somebody from that group because you might not be meaning to offend, but you could. The biggest thing I had a problem with was in the Shadows series. In that time period, for authenticity purposes, using the N-word would have been appropriate. That's what overseers said. That's what, the oppressors used. And I had a Pulitzer Prize winning author who was black say, yeah, you got to use it. And I was like, the word makes my stomach churn. I've never used the word. I don't like the word. To me, it's the worst word. I mean, to me, the F word is less offensive than the N word. And he's like, you've got to do it for authenticity. So I did, and it was really hard. And then the more I thought of it, I was like, I don't want anyone reading my books thinking that I think this word is okay. And so I took it back out. And I used, words like darky or colored. I tried to find other derogatory words that weren't as offensive, because it's offensive to me. But I'm a mixed breed. I was born in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which is located in the South, but technically it's all retired Yankees. So my dad was from West Hartford. My mom was from the hills of West Virginia. So I'm half Yankee, half hillbilly, born in the South. And now you understand why I'm whacked, just not right in the head. But I've lived up in Newark, Delaware, Cherry Hill, New Jersey, beautiful, beautiful states, but my heart is in the South. My heart is in the South because I've been here most of my life, Beaufort especially. There is just nowhere in the world better than Beaufort. I don't care what anybody says, no offense. Because they keep saying like 70% of the readers are doing like digital, but then they say that people are still loving the paperback. I publish through Ingram Spark, which is a major distribution company for worldwide distribution. I also publish through Amazon because they figured out what we were doing. Those of us who went through Ingram, that we were using them to get sales, and so now they won't link up your stuff unless you publish through them too, so I'm publishing through everyone now, just keep everyone happy. But I probably see more in digital sales right now. The beauty of Kindles and digital sales is I can reach the world. I can get out in the world. Paperback copies, local bookstores, they all carry my books, which is great. When I do book signings, obviously, that helps. But digital, I can reach around the world and get to people that I normally couldn't. So much as I don't like Amazon, the company, it's his company. He has the right to run it and do with his money as he pleases, and who am I to tell him what he should and shouldn't do with it? And to be perfectly honest, it's benefiting me. I don't want to bite the hand that feeds me. So it's a difficult thing because I tend to be a little bit on the soapbox kind of girl. Oh, this is wrong. Yeah, well, but Amazon, I think it is like 80% of all book sales do come through Amazon. But I will not shop at Books A Million that open in Beaufort. Do not shop at Books A Million in Beaufort. Naughty, naughty, naughty. We have 4 independent bookstores in downtown Beaufort. You shop there. Bad if you go to Books A Million. Bad. Any other questions?